Welcome back to the Comics Aficionados, everybody. We're live. We're a couple minutes late, but we're basically on time. And today we're going to talk about the worst character assassinations in the history of comic book, people. It's going to be a very lively, fun discussion. I've got 10, count them, 10 big character assassinations. Hopefully it's got all the big ones that you've been expecting. I'm sure we're going to veer off the path and cover a couple of extras. But I do have my sights on some pretty big character assassinations. And I have an all-star, a star-studded panel to discuss this with me. First up, we got Larry King Undead. He's an independent comic writer. Used to be a YouTuber, but now he just doesn't have time for it because he's all about the create. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing pretty good. Writer, artist, what do you call it?
Probably the editor, too,
futurist.
Right?
A little editing too, even though I'm terrible at it. But hey, look at it this way: at least I'm not getting. At least I don't have Marvel or DC behind me to be like, here, he's terrible, but he's also sanctioned by us. So like, hey, I get to make mistakes. I'm small time. I'm small fry.
Yeah. So we got Larry in the house. Also with this, as always, my partner in crime, the co-host of the Comics Aficionados. Doc, how you doing today?
I am alive, and it's a Saturday morning, so that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, we already talked about This Week in XMen, which will be live tomorrow, and you weren't as curmudgeon as normal, so it's been a good week.
No, I was not.
Wasn't quite as ecstatic as I was, but, you know, we get what we can take. And last but not least is my man in the Great Northwest, the poobah of comic books, El Percherino. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's fun. This is going to be a fun topic to talk about.
So we might as well kind of get into it. The reason that we're talking about this and the reason it came up is I did a video on the channel this week where I talked about the umbrage I took on Tom King's take on Mr. Terrific in Strange Adventures. I believe it was issue number 5. It might have been 6, where essentially we learned that Mr. Terrific is essentially motivated by his wife and unborn child dying, not to avenge their death, or he's motivated, you know, to show them that he appreciated them. He wanted to do great things. He was motivated because he was relieved because he didn't want to be a father. Felt like character assassination. Perch, what did you think? Did I overreact to that, or did you have the same reaction?
No, I really disliked it. And there's been some theories out there that this was just him kind of, not really telling the truth. So he would get her to open up and talk, and it was a strategy. But I really don't think so. It's not how it reads. That's not how it plays. That's not how Mr. Terrific's being written in this series. And I think it's just it's this way of wanting to deconstruct characters in a kind of dark and negative fashion, and it's very poor. So I mean, again, as West is referring to in this comic, and this is what, issue number 5 or 6? Where are we with this comic?
I believe it's actually 5.
Too far. Too far.
Issue. It feels that way. No, this is 6. So we hit the route. Okay. We hit the midway point.
Yeah,
and it is. It's this long conversation between the two, and Mr. Terrific basically is trying to get him to open up and reveal some secrets because he's investigating what actually went on. And he goes on a bit about not wanting to have a child, and when it was when the child died, he was relieved from it, and it's a bad moment. I'm with you. It felt wrong. It felt uncomfortable, and it's also one of these things that's going to stick with the character. 10 years from now, people are going to be referencing this moment, and not in a good way.
It always seems like, Tom King doesn't create, he never does this with his own creations. He's always destroying other people's creations. And it bothers me. And even if you go back to the origin of Mr. Terrific himself, where he was essentially suicidal because his wife had died and he was visited by the Spectre. He told him the story of the original Mr. Terrific. And he was inspired by that and to use his genius and intellect to go and help the common man, with this fair play mantra. That's a good origin. And then, of course, they did end up adding on that his wife was pregnant at the time. That wasn't as far as the very original, but that was added on. But when that happened, he went to where his wife's grave was and put another grave for his unborn child.
Yeah, it doesn't match with history. It added tragedy, but in a way that made the character more determined to kind of fight for justice and fair play and all of those pieces. It made the character stronger in a heroic sense. And it tears down the character. And it is a pattern. I think we're going to hit a few Tom King things potentially here. It is a pattern of that writer who the only way they can get emotional weight and resonance in the story is to destroy something. And I think it's wrong. I do think I had the same expression as you. I thought it was a low point in this series. It felt like this was something they were building to as a midpoint kind of larger reveal. And it's this attempt to let's tear everyone down. And this comic began that way. It was intended to be Adam Strange and kind of you hear the heroism, but maybe there's a dark side. And as the series is rolling out, it's like, no, everybody has a dark side. And why? What does this add to the mythology? What does this add to the character? It adds nothing. And like I said, 5 years from now, we're going to be talking about, hey, here's the guy who was happy his kids died. That's a shame.
Yeah,
that sounds about par for the course with Tom King.
Yeah, unfortunately it is. I think it is kind of his go-to style in these books to reveal kind of these dark and uncomfortable truths about the characters that's supposed to deconstruct them in the way that seem relatable. And it's you don't need to do that with everybody. Two, this is escapism. You don't need all your characters to have dark and shadowy flaws.
Well, also it's kind of pervasive of a very negative stereotype about black males in culture. And Mr. Terrific is one of the few strong black male superheroes DC Comics has. I'm shocked that their editorial staff, that their management team would let him take these kind of liberties with the character.
I mean, yeah, me too. It is. Put it this way, and I don't want to go completely down this road, but at a time when Tom King's already deflecting some negative feedback for being, potentially, it seems to have problems with Asian people at times. And now we hit this, and they're using a very negative stereotype about black males. I think that just once again, it's starting to feel like a pattern more than a one-off. And that's probably taking it a little farther than it needs to go, but still, why would you do this at this moment? Why would you put something like this in? And I think Mr. Terrific is a character that DC and Warner Media and those other companies, probably want to use. It's a cool character. He's got a cool power set. He's good role model, good character. I mean, a lot of good aspects to the character. Now is absolutely not the time to deconstruct him in this way.
Yeah, and he actually, he's got the cool jacket. It's got a good logo on it. There's a lot of things that you can sell about the character. And he is in I believe, the Arrowverse, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, so I just had some monsoon-type rain come down. Does everyone hear that?
I hear that.
I feel like a fan might have kicked on or something like that. I was like, okay, one of those. I know how hot it can be, but wow, that's...
So I'm going to mute myself. And I'm gonna. Hopefully, you guys will be able to take this until this rain stops.
It's fine. I mean, to me, it's not that bad.
The fact you have internet, you have internet over rain like that's impressive.
It's typhoon season is what the problem is. And while I don't have a typhoon coming over me, there is some residual typhoon weather, kind of a few hundred miles away, that's hitting us. So,
wow.
Hopefully, it's not too bad. So. I think we've hit Mr. Terrific enough. Obviously, that was fresh. I did a video recently. If you haven't watched it, I definitely suggest it. I might have lost my mind a little bit on Tom King, which I normally don't do on the channel, to be completely honest. But we're moving on to the next one, and this is going to be a doc special. Cyclops and Avengers versus X-Men. What did you think about that character assassination?
See, this is a problem with pretty much any Avengers versus X-Men event in the last 20 years. The X-Men do things to actually solve all of the problems with race and, bigotry and everybody hating mutants. And then the Avengers have to come in and fix it. So they want to bring back racism. Awesome, I guess. I don't understand the logic on this. And in every single occasion, they love to just break an X-Man character in the process, and this time Cyclops got the gig. I mean, they had already established for a couple of years now that Cyclops was essentially they had passed the torch on from Xavier versus Magneto over to Cyclops. Cyclops was the guy. And then they decided to turn him into Mutant Hitler because he decided he didn't want the Avengers coming onto his island and kidnapping a child. It was pretty much quintessentially Bendis. I mean, between Bendis and Jason Aaron's hatred of Cyclops, after this, Bendis takes over the X-Men, and Jason Aaron takes over the other half of the X-Men franchise, and you decide to turn him into Mutant Hitler because he, again, decides, hey, we don't want to be killed. We'll still be heroes, but we're just not going to take your crap anymore. We're going to go and stand on our, sit on our island that's not a mutant eating monster. We're not going to be drug dealers like Hickman X-Men. We're not going to hold the world hostage like Hickman X-Men. We're just going to go over and do this, be on our island over here. And after you guys screwed up Atlantis, we're going to let the Atlanteans hang out with us too, and they'll have an underground nation right below our nation. Cyclops was kind of always the Boy Scout. But he, Morrison had kind of started this with Cyclops being a cheating bastard with Emma. But then when they screwed up, whenever they did AVX and Cyclops, I understood like them all wanting to consolidate the Phoenix power, but there was nothing wrong with what the Phoenix Five did in the first place. Yes, they changed the world, but they improved it. Which is
all right, Doc. Do I have a second to welcome Pele to the channel?
Oh yeah, welcome Pele.
Pele, welcome to the channel. You came in a little bit late. How you doing today, buddy?
Messy. Internet's been all over the place today, so I had to turn on one of my backup sources. So,
well, we're glad that you could make it. All right, back to you guys.
Good. It's all good.
No, I mean, I don't know. Does anybody else have anything to add? Just that the whole thing with, I mean, it started with Morrison with, turning Cyclops into a cheating bastard. Ended with him essentially borderline, not really married, but basically power couple with one of the X-Men's biggest enemies in Emma Frost, even though she had been kind of on the side of the Angels for a while, but she was still a bitch. She was wonderful as a bitch. I loved it. She softened a little bit because of Cyclops, and he hardened up a little bit because of her. And I felt that it was a good, healthy relationship for both of them. But turning Cyclops into a genocidal maniac, and making him, they tried to, after this, he never actually did really anything wrong. He didn't kill people. He improved the world. The only person he killed was Xavier right at the end, and that was just shoehorned in there. It was just bad. It made no sense.
It was a tough moment, and I think it's one of those cases, and we'll probably hit on this a lot in some of these. It's an indication of where, because the immediate fan response was Cyclops was right, and there was a kind of a very strong outcry that they did Cyclops dirty with this whole thing.
They did.
And they did, yeah. But when you're a company and you see your fans reacting kind of in unison like that, it's an indication you took a wrong turn somewhere, like a big one. And it started, I mean, I don't know if it started there, but it was another case where Marvel seemed to double down against what the majority was saying. And it's a case where the company could have gone, whoa, okay, sorry, yeah, we had a story in mind, didn't quite come out like we intended, and clearly the fans want us to go in a different direction. But instead, they spent the next few years wanting to fight and justify this move that clearly was wrong for the story, for the kind of momentum and everything else. And it sent the X-Men down a pretty dumb path that it just recovered from with the Hickman stuff in terms of sales. I think it was a terrible moment for the character.
I think it's that Vince McMahon style of, you don't like what you like, we'll tell you what you like. It's like, you know, it's the like Cyclops be like Daniel Bryan. Everybody, no, that ain't gonna work. No, you can't like what you like. We're gonna tell you what you like. You like Roman Reigns. You like John Cena.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. It feels like that. It feels like it was really pushing, and it's one of the more recent examples, I think, of Marvel just really going against the will of its fans that often will say, like Doc here, who will put up with many a dry drought of the X-Men to get to something we love, and then you do stuff like this. It's painful.
Yeah, it really was. It was painful. If you look back at the fan reaction on pretty much any of the X-Men versus events in the past 15 years, AVX, Avengers versus Inhumans, House of M, in all the cases, the mutants improved the world and the Avengers had to fix it. How do you fix improvement?
Well, yeah, and another kind of odd thing in here is we've heard so much lately about how the X-Men and the mutants are meant to be analogies for kind of racial suffering and kind of this battle that we've had, and this is something that's come up a lot from the Marvel office, that this is kind of the analogy, but if that's true, why is it that as a publisher continuously have them be kind of one-upped by other teams? Why do you have them be defeated? Why do you constantly have that team taken on the chin and have the Avengers, when they try and solve things, you have the Avengers swoop in and quote-unquote repair it, like you're saying. If you're aware that this is an analogy for kind of racial injustice and other things, why do you have them keep losing constantly?
I can answer that.
I'm sure I knew you could.
It might get Wes demonetized to answer.
No.
We're not monetized.
We're not monetized anyway. They need a victim, and it's a lot like social justice in our world, in that there has to be a victim, and there has to be someone who has to take it on the chin, and no one can actually rise above the problems that they have on their own. And it's ugly. It's really ugly, but it is a parallel to the real world. I'll give it to them that, because even though that a lot of people have risen above the problems they have, and we have this incredible equality under the law, they're still seen as victims. They're still seen as being downtrodden, and they're not allowed to just continue on with their lives and be themselves.
I mean, that's fair.
I think that's a good point.
Might have some wrestling connotations to it. It's called a dusty finish.
Yeah,
where you want to present an outcome, but you don't want to commit to it. So you let the people say it, then you undo it the next time, that as soon as possible. It seems to be what Marvel does a lot of times. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a dusty finish. I think that's a good analogy for a lot of these events.
One thing now I can think of is who is Captain X, and it's like the Midnight Rider deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Clearly, we need
exactly. It's
comics and wrestling tied together so well.
They do. There's so many parallels.
What you were talking about.
I have no idea.
I'm lost.
Well, a dusty finish is basically, you got Dusty Rhodes. He's taking on the Nature Boy Ric Flair in Clash of the Champions. They want to send the crowd home happy. So Dusty, the challenger or the good guy, has to overcome the bad guy because it's the big Clash of the Champions event. So when it happens, Dusty goes in for the pin, and he gets the 1, 2, 3. They give him the title, and he goes home that night. When you come back for the next show, they go, we didn't realize this. Ric Flair's foot was underneath the rope. Dusty didn't win the title. And they put it back on Ric Flair, so the crowd gets to go home. The people watching the show get to go home as Dusty is a champion, but they undo it as soon as possible using technicality because that's not the outcome that they actually wanted. Dusty finish.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I
All right.
understand that now.
Yeah, perfectly explained. And that is that is comics in a lot of ways. It's like, hey, do you want this? Okay, here you kind of get a glimpse of it now. Haha! But now we're going to pull it out from under you. It was a messy moment, and it was on a streak where the X-Men were racing to the bottom, unfortunately.
Well, it was a regular thing. But I mean, Death of X, Avengers versus Inhumans, House of M, AVX.
Don't worry, we're going to talk about House of
Fatal
M here.
Attractions. You can go back as far as you want, and they do it the same thing every time. It's
Every
tedious. Yeah.
All right, so have we hit up Cyclops AVX enough? Is it time for the next one?
Let's go.
Boom, we got Captain Marvel, who I think in many ways Marvel would like to be the flagship character, the greatest Avenger, the most powerful Avenger of the Marvel Universe. Civil War II, she basically goes complete fascist. Larry, what did you think? I know you're not a big fan of Civil War II. Do you think that was character assassination on the part of Captain Marvel when she was just gaining some traction?
Oh, 100% so. You took a character who, admittedly, was kind of revitalized, kind of given a new birth, like with Chris Claremont after the whole debacle with giving birth to her son / lover, which is
/ rapist.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Well, I was like, let's soften it a tiny bit, but yes, that's 100% correct. Then we had her as Miss Marvel for an extremely long time. That Brian Reed run, I quite enjoyed that, and except for the crossover. So, like, you had a good chunk of time where was she an A-list? Was she like low tier, like A- maybe? But we had she was pretty good. Then they pushed it. She's getting that Roman Reigns push. She's going to be the flagship. She's going to be Captain Marvel. There's never been another Captain Marvel woman, never Monica Rambeau. But no. They push her, and it's like they keep pushing her, and they turn her into a jackbooted thug, killing Tony Stark. We're going to arrest people. We're going to basically, the
space Nazi.
Yes. And a filthy alien too. Part Kree. It's like there.
Yep.
You can't have a normal person, but this is a character who has a lot of depth to her if you actually care to put that into her character. But a haircut is not a character. A costume does not make a character, and it's like they made her costume so. What was so great about the whole Miss Marvel is like you didn't need a fancy costume, just black costume, lightning bolt, domino mask, boom, you done. Sash. That's it. And her character was the Warbird. Binary was more interesting than this take of Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
We're having we have a character who we're told is great, but is not actually shown why is she great. And with Civil War, turn her into the monster, the absolute monster of it. And it's like, what are you doing? And it's like they're so oblivious to that fact. Because
she was
even though it's been just writing it.
How long? She was Warbird for how long? Just like a hot minute. I mean, it was not really that long at all. And to me, that was the most interesting iteration of the character.
Post Heroes Return, I believe.
Yeah.
Well,
it wasn't long. It was during a time when a lot of people weren't paying attention, or just things were. It was a time where more time went by than you think, because a lot of things were very clumsy during that time period. But Warbird was a good character.
mm-hmm.
Well, remember though.
Go ahead,
Larry. What you said about a haircut isn't a personality.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a comic industry right now that believes that gender, sexual preference and race are personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
So-
exactly it. It's what you look like. Like, they don't care. Like, what if that character has autoimmune disease? What if they have a stoma? What if they have some kind of something that you don't see? Like, what if you don't like, something along those lines? Like, that doesn't matter. This person, they're taking pills every day to keep their this disease in check, but they're not complaining because they're not complaining about it every single day and crying victim. Clearly, everything's perfect, okay with them. They look fine. I've known people in extreme pain, but they keep a brave face about it because like nobody cares. Like, it's like, why should I bother somebody with that? That right there, that's some interesting character work. But you can't do that.
Like Boatman, for that matter.
I thought you were
So
talking about me
Chillmonger brought
for
up a
minute
pretty
there.
good point there, Percy. He says the difference in wrestling and comic books is wrestling, you get instant feedback. In comic books, everything's already lined up, and what's going to come the next month has already been out there. Like, you remember when Kurt Angle got introduced in the WWF?
Yeah, everybody hated him.
What? God damn it, Doc. They did
Sorry.
months of vignettes where he was talking about the 3 eyes, and they were promoting him as the first gold medalist ever in the WWF, and they expected everyone to love him. He came out, his music came on, and everyone told him, "You suck," for 2 minutes straight. The announce team went from talking about how great he was to talking about how bad he was instantly,
Yeah.
and they just changed it
I
on
do
the
remember
fly
that.
during the broadcast, if you go and watch it.
I don't
You
know. I
can't do
don't
that
know
in
much about
comics. You
wrestling.
kind of have to commit to the bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know much about wrestling, but I do remember that, and that was one of the most shocking moments for me. I just happened to be watching that for whatever reason, and was shocked. I couldn't believe the crowd's reaction.
Well,
I was
I mean,
like-
think about how The Rock was. When he was Rocky Maivia.
Die, Rocky, die.
Well, they tried to commit to that one for a while before the Die Rocky Die chance.
Well, they did, but they moved from this is a generational somebody to be proud of to this guy's kind of a douche. They did do that pretty quick, even though they kept him in that persona. They definitely did shift the way they were talking about to lean into it.
the presentation of the character.
Yeah,
Yes. And then it was just a matter of time for the heel turn to, and the thing is, they should have leaned in with Carol to that heel turn and made her a straight up villain for the next 4 or 5 years after, with what they did to her in Civil War II.
They should have, and that would have been a lot more interesting than what happened, because she basically became an anti-hero of sorts, but it depended on who was writing her and who was, even who was drawing her, because they give her a more sinister look at times, and sometimes they didn't, and you didn't really know what she was, and that just kind of left readers scratching their heads and wondering, am I supposed to root for her, or am I supposed to, I don't know what's going on here, and they just left it completely ambivalent.
it was a weird moment, and it to me it's a little bit of, I think, how Bendis, who did Civil War II, but a lot of the problems existed after that. She immediately went into a storyline where she was the most popular superhero in the world, and that was kind of what they ran, but of course it never took. But Bendis seemed to be confused by the outcomes of these big events, whether it's Cyclops we just talked about, but also the original Civil War. It's hard to look at that and come out with a view that Iron Man was a really awesome, had everything right, great guy. That wasn't kind of the point of Miller's story, and that wasn't how the fans were reacting to it. But when Bendis started writing Mighty Avengers and some of these other pieces, he wrote a Tony Stark that was somewhat triumphant. And in Civil War II, Captain Marvel clearly looked like she was going over the line and everything else, but in Bendis's head, Tony Stark was the villain, Captain Marvel was the hero, and it certainly didn't look that way on the page. It isn't how it was communicated to readers, but that was what they went with. And it was a kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of the conclusion to their stories.
Yeah, and this was a problem in both of the Civil Wars. If they would have committed to just an ideological disagreement without either of them crossing lines, you would have had a much better story, especially with the outcome. And because honestly, Civil War, the first one, Tony shouldn't have been hiring terrorists to go and do stuff to make his points for him. Shouldn't have been rounding up other heroes and putting them into,
All right,
a negative
Doc, you're
zone.
kind of spoiling
but-
another one of our character assassinations.
Okay, but it should have ended with just an ideological conflict that literally tore down the whole American government, because it would have been something that showed how pointless regulation is with beings like this, superhero level. And it would have essentially required the heroes to reunite in order to reestablish order.
Yeah. Well said.
Sorry.
No, it's well said. It is.
Well, and they didn't only destroy Captain Marvel in Civil War II. They did a long-term damage to other new characters as well.
She-Hulk, Shulky is basically shit.
She's never recovered. She hasn't. Well, she hasn't
Miss
recovered
Marvel
yet.
as well, which was actually kind of becoming a pretty popular character.
Namor was almost becoming a hero again, and bam.
No, it was bad. I'm trying to think of any character that actually came out better for it. It made Miles Morales took a lot of the lightheartedness out of that title, which was negative. It threw a very weird wrench into Peter Parker, who was a tech billionaire at the time. I mean, you just go down the list of all the characters who were involved. I don't think anyone really emerged from that better off.
I think that was probably the most. Speaking of Peter Parker in that one instance, I'll make this real brief. That was one of the most interesting turns that they ever had with Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and they did not commit to it for more than 6 months.
That's because
It's under a year.
That's because Slott's understanding of economics is
really poor. Yeah. He has the economic understanding of a kindergartner, but it was still something that could have really been explored at the rags to riches type of situation, and how that would have changed Peter Parker. That could have run for years and still been fresh because of what could have changed in the Marvel universe because of that. But no, they just this is interesting, threw it away.
I think this leads fairly right into the next one, which I don't know if Wes is ready to move on, but it actually does fit, and it is.
Let's do it.
I think this is I think Doc, you're on top to talk about this, but it is Spider-Man, One More Day, and Sins Past. And I think before we close it out, we should bring this particular one back, because I think it's another example you could fit in there. I think Bailey's right.
Yeah, yep. It really is. One More Day. Now, I have issues with it. I actually have more issues somehow with fans' memories of that, because we have to remember, Peter never said yes.
Right.
Yeah.
MJ did, and Peter just went along with her.
Right.
So you gotta you get a double whammy there of Peter, not able to just go along with his wife, and MJ. It's a bigger character assassination of Mary Jane than Peter.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it really was the worst possible way to try to put that toothpaste back in the tube. And then Sins Past is.
Oh, we're on to that one.
Well,
we jumped into it since I already. I was kind of trying to kind of guide the conversation over to Peter Parker to blend into this next one, but
yeah, you did a good job. Actually, that was a perfect segue.
Great segue, sir. I understood, because you know what, this was another case. This comes back to Civil War I, of them screwing up something very fundamental about the Civil War story, and that's that there was never a requirement for any of them to unmask publicly.
right.
There was only a require of registration with the government, not public.
It's true. The point, and this actually didn't come across in the comic as well as in the notes. If you read the pitch that Miller was doing, that moment was intended to be Tony Stark convincing Peter to unmask publicly and do more than what was required to really help convince all the other heroes that he could be a face of what heroes were supposed to be, and kind of show them that it was the right thing to do, and also was kind of manipulating Peter quite a bit of. This will allow you to step out of kind of this loser shadow, and you get to stand your place with Steve and myself as the legends of the superhero community. Step out of the shadows. He was toying with Peter quite a bit. I don't think that came out in the comic as well as they intended, but that was the point.
It really, really did not, and it was, and then you had a massive overcorrection, because that is one that you can't. I mean, look, they've tried it with Daredevil unmasking a couple of times, and then they just kind of hand wave that away. They could have hand waved that away with Spider-Man too. Oh no, Tony just lied to me. I was just a guy that he knew, and he paid me to put on Spider-Man's costume. Some bullshit like that. Instead, you end up with One More Day where, look, everybody was okay. Even Aunt May was okay passing.
It was her time. I mean, really, if you think about it, I know that she's a beloved character of the franchise and everything like that, and the timing felt perfect for her to move on. And
yes.
That was just really bad. That was such a bad decision. It was terrible.
It really was. And this actually just falls right on the heels of Sins Past. We had already done during the Straczynski era, because that was, One More Day was the end of that, because JMS had no interest in writing this story. He did not want to write this story. It ended up being the thing that basically caused him to leave Marvel, even though he was up for contract renewal. He's like, nope, I'm not. And he had introduced a lot of stuff through his. How long was he on Spider-Man? Like 6 years?
Yeah, a little over 6 years, I believe.
And he had done some really interesting things with adding, the spider totems and all the Morlun and Ezekiel and all that stuff. And that was interesting-ish. But then you got to, and especially when you got to like the Other, which is another thing that's kind of, it's something that splits the audience. But Sins Past is one that I think we can all like, especially since they brought it up again recently in Spider-Man 850. Mm-hmm. This is one that you want everyone to forget. This is like almost Avengers 200 level, shit that you want the fans to forget, and you want to avoid at all costs ever reminding them that you published this. Because Sins Past was Norman banging Gwen and having kids with her.
Yeah.
I still don't understand how the kids were that old. Because they should have been about 7 instead of like
Goblin
20?
formula, apparently. The Goblin.
Oh, yeah. That's what it was. The Goblin
formula, guys. It's Goblin formula.
It's Goblin formula.
Yeah, well, there was some other
articles for bad people.
There was some Goblin formula in Gwen too,
goodness.
and that's the problem. No,
They could have just said that she's a clone by a Jackal clone, and Norman's like, "Hey, here's $1 million. Give me a Gwen clone."
Yeah, I mean, it would have been much better to find out that it was a Jackal Gwen clone.
It was supposed to be his kids, though. It was supposed to be like that. I was like, no.
Yeah, because they were going to give Peter adult kids.
Yeah,
and no, I mean, you just like that thing you're about to do with One More Day in about a year from now, and you're complaining about the fact that marriage ages a character, especially somebody that's supposed to be like Spider-Man. Giving them 20-something-year-old children will age him a little bit more.
Yeah.
What the actual hell, Marvel?
Yeah,
I
isn't
remember at the
Spider-Man
time-
still like 29?
Yeah, he's because the Marvel sliding timeline is at about 14 years now, and he was 15 in AF 15.
Mm-hmm. It
So-
kind of reminds me. At the time, I remember that whole situation as it felt like a soap opera. It felt so much like, you know, I was like, am I reading Spider-Man or am I watching Young and the Restless here? I don't know what the heck's going on. And it was that bad. It was. I just don't understand the thinking that was involved there to give him adult children, and it was just.
What you should be saying, am I reading Spider-Man or am I reading WrestleMania right now? Then you know you hit the right spot.
Yeah, it was a weird move. I mean, on all fronts, and what was Marvel thinking is it was creating or it was solving problems that didn't really need to be solved in so many cases. And this comic and this whole moment in time is always stuck in my memory of the only time that a customer came and picked up the comics in their pull box and sat there and read the final issue of One More Day and then threw it on the floor and just had this emotional just tantrum kind of outburst. And it's you know, so to their credit, they generated a reaction. Unfortunately, it was a reaction that the guy never came back. So,
Right.
You know, that was not a reaction.
How many people dropped Spider-Man at that time? I mean, we can talk about how many people dropped Batman because of the King situation. And that's fair. There was a huge number, Superman as well, with Bendis, but Spider-Man, the extinction level event that happened with Spider-Man after One More Day cannot be discounted. That really hurt the character in ways that we still have not recovered from.
Why haven't they retconned that out?
There's because Joe Casada is still with the company, and he would throw a massive temper tantrum because that was his baby.
It's not a brainchild, that's a brain fart.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. He's never going. Look, out of everything we know about comics professionals, exactly how frequently do they realize, oh, I fucked up, I shouldn't have done that? No, they always double, triple, and quadruple down.
Yep.
They will never admit that they made a mistake.
It's a strange problem. It is a strange problem because, and it's weird. The words coming out of my mouth is going to sound very, very strange, but it's a case where Vince McMahon seems to have a better connection and humility with his fans than a lot of people who run comic companies who do struggle to reverse course. I mean, they do dig in. There is the fans are complaining about this, and maybe the sales are dropping, and maybe there's issues, but you know, we know better. We're gonna give them what they want. We're gonna tell them what they want. It's a very strange behavior because most companies, most environments, they would cash it in. They would be like, okay, well, that one didn't work. You know, 9 of our ideas worked. This one didn't work. We're gonna reverse course. We're gonna do something else. But with this one,
and promote it, and then people will come back to buy that comic just to show you how much they hated the other one.
I mean, there was a perfect loophole. There was the perfect loophole in One More Day that Peter himself never accepted the deal. You know, they could have had like, you know, a high-powered lawyer, like, you know, or at least a competent lawyer, like
She-Hulk.
like Daredevil. like Daredevil or She-Hulk. You know, come in and actually make Spider-Man's case before the living tribunal. You know, against Mephisto, and they could have had this courtroom issue. You know, that would have been really
Wrestler's
cool.
Court. We could have had Undertaker there.
That would have been bonkers. Yeah.
That would have been awesome, and they could have actually had reality rewind, and you could have seen what would have happened one way or the other, and it would have been awesome. It would have been an amazing. It would have been an amazing series of issues. You know, the the court decision of the decade, you know. And,
Character witness, Captain Universe comes in.
Yes.
yeah, it would have been amazing.
Doppelganger.
I don't know.
Excuse me, Doppelganger. What do you know about this? Rah, rah, rah.
I have a little less confidence they would have
Hostile
pulled that
witness.
off, but it would have been. But I do think it just goes back to generally when these mistakes happen, when something comes up like 10 years later and people are still pissed about this moment, I think there's the opportunity to be a little bit humble about it and go, well, not everybody likes it. Or even if you're not going to change it, just acknowledge that a lot of your fan base is still pissed. But
think about how much money Sony had to spend changing the look of Sonic the Hedgehog for that movie.
Yes.
Sure.
And they ate a huge
That was the result.
financial haircut because people said, I don't want that. They're like, our mistake.
Yeah. And look how much, and I guarantee that movie made about double, if not triple, what it would have made had they left it alone.
Oh, it was Paramount, my bad.
It definitely helped. And I think you can't jump at every time people get upset. It's just that is a path of madness as well. But there's cases where, like, sustained 10 years later, people are still upset if it's a storyline. At the very least, when you go out in public, go, yeah, maybe that wasn't the most popular decision, and you can leave it at that. But instead, when people go out in public today, it's like this angry, I'm not going to talk about that. The fans need to grow up. Like, what are you doing? Don't respond. Right?
And to what Doc said, they included references to both these storylines in Spider-Man 8, 50, and 50.
Yeah,
Sure.
like I'm sitting there looking at that Norman and Ghost Spider-Gwen scene on that weird transport ship in 850, and I'm like, you finally got everybody to forget about this, and you're gonna fucking remind them? How stupid are you?
Well, I mean, unless they're planning to, clean that stuff up in the next 12 issues or so, in which case, great. But otherwise, don't keep picking at the scab. Just let it go.
Yeah, that shit was finally starting to heal up, where we weren't bringing it up every other week.
But it is a knee-jerk reaction at this point. I think, what is it? CB Cebulski tweets that, hey, I've got an idea of how to sell 1 million copies of a comic. And if you look at that original tweet and the responses, a healthy proportion of them are all like, oh, you're going to undo one more day? Like, it's been years now, and people are still hammering the point. Like, at some point, let the light bulb go off that maybe, just maybe, you might have made a mistake there.
I don't know. I still think Sins Past is worse than One More Day.
Yeah, and the thing is that they don't even... They have every opportunity in the world to retcon Sins Past, and they just won't take it.
Yeah.
And the fact is, it's not like any of these characters, like that the kids, are still around. So there's no point in not retconning it, because you're not undoing anything with existing characters that have spun out of that story. You're not fucking anything up. You're just fixing a problem.
All right, so we can't talk about Spider-Man for the whole thing. We're going to have to move on to the next character. We're going to talk about a very recent one. This is also Tom King. Wally West, Heroes in Crisis. Pele, I know you were a big fan of Heroes in Crisis. I did not enjoy this event, basically making Wally West not only a mass murderer, the worst part is when he decides that he's going to frame, using his knowledge of the police system, going to frame 2 innocent people for the murders that he did, and then he went into the future, killed himself, brought his own body back to give himself more time. I don't know. Did you feel like this was character assassination, Pele?
Literally, figuratively, it was, probably the worst example of it in the last 20 years in comics. Yeah, in every sense of the word, it's character assassination. And this is what's so incredibly damning about this is that this is the Flash for like 50% of comic readers. This is their Flash. He is the most hopeful, the most positive, the most, he is the symbol of virtue and decency and everything like that, all that kind of stuff to all of these comic readers, and in one fell swoop just destroyed destroyed his legacy, and it was shocking in a way that, you know, I still kind of scratch my head over. And, you know, it brought about another extinction event. Not a huge one, but it still brought along another extinction event for readers. You know, there's still people that have not come back to DC Comics since then. You know, and it's ugly. It doesn't make very much sense. There was 1,001 different ways to move the story along without having to do something so incredibly, you know, ill-conceived and poorly thought out. It was terrible in every single way, and it blows my mind that is what he came up with. I mean, this is beyond Batman, and, you know, there's some people that love Tom King's Batman, and if you do, that's fine. You know, that's your thing. Okay, but I've yet to see anyone other than the most diehard, you know, crazy identitarians, you know, really stand behind Tom King in what he did with Wally West. And that is probably the worst decision Tom King's made in a comic book. And it's
saying a lot.
Oh God, it's so bad, and it does say a lot. It's I still can't, to this day, can't believe that that's what happened. And I know that he's gone to try to repair this, and now they're kind of backslidden on that. But I just don't think that there's going to be a situation where they fully get him out, get Wally West out from under this. And it's always going to keep coming back, you know, like a bad tamale. And, you know, this is the Peter Parker one more day of DC Comics, but it's worse because I don't think that Peter's ever become a homicidal maniac. So it's ugly, and it destroyed the Heroes in Crisis. Had a fairly decent, you know, premise on the onset. It was stupid. You know, people go and talk to, talk to a recording and, you know, about their ideas and about what's wrong with them and their fears and everything like that. Then it gets erased, supposedly, and which it never does because it's Batman. But you know, and then just turn that into just the worst shit show that I've ever seen from DC Comics. It was terrible, and that's all I can say about that. It's just it was the worst decision in the modern era, in my opinion. The worst decision by DC Comics in the modern era is that turn, that one turn with Wally West.
Larry, did you realize what they did to all the Rebirth Titans series? Do you remember the original lineup?
The Titans. I actually wasn't reading that one. I didn't read that.
So it's Wally West. We know what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Dick Grayson becomes Rick Grayson.
Oh yeah, he gets shot in the head. Turns the
Tempest becomes an alcoholic. Roy Harper is murdered by Wally West. And what happened to Donna Troy, Perch?
I mean, so many things. I think
something happened to her too.
Yeah, she went missing. That was a good storyline. And then there was a million. She just went through the ringer continuously, and then the New 52, she was kind of erased, and then became back as a villain, and then kind of there was. Yeah, that team's had it hard.
She became one of the infected.
Yeah, that's true. Anna became one of the infected as well. So
post Rebirth, they essentially went through that wonderful Titans run that Dan Abnett did. And if you haven't read that, I suggest you go do it. And they took every one of those characters single-handedly and just destroyed them all.
Yeah, they turned Rebirth into Afterbirth. I mean, it was
DCF.
Gross.
There seems to be a pattern. If you were a Teen Titan, Wolfman Perez, that probably the best thing they were doing before.
Mhm.
Kind of they rebooted everything in Crisis, but it seems like if you were part of the Teen Titans, like your
Unless
future's
you're
gonna be
Raven.
bleak.
Well,
Unless
it's,
you're Cyborg. Unless you're Cyborg. Cyborg gets pushed for no good reason. He's the lamest character name, the lamest character design. I talk to machines. Like, okay, you're a football player, whatever. It's like
he's no Chris Steele. Yeah.
but wow.
It's the Titans always felt like the really bad things they wanted to do to the main comic characters, but they knew they couldn't really mess up that IP, so they shove it off on the Titans. It's like, which one do we want to make a drug addict? I know, let's Superman. No, we can't do Superman. Let's toss it off on the Titans, and it became kind of a running joke. This Wally is an indication, because I do think Williamson at least throw a life preserver out there, as well as Liddell, of how to kind of recover this character. And I think it would have been successful. They were fairly quick about it. I'm dismayed to see that they're, in future state, we're turning Wally evil again. I don't know what in the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
But it's a case of, with DC and with Marvel, with anybody, when your fans clearly resonate with a character, when they like the character, when they want to buy that character, when there's a lot of love and attention to that character, take the win, take your money off the table, and dick around with some other character. You don't need to. Just like it seems like it's almost a dare when the fans really like a particular character. Like, well, let's see if they'll like them even after we do this. And like, don't. What are you doing? Just you need wins, and Wally West is an easy win.
I think a lot of it comes down to Wally West is the Flash for like Gen X. Gen Xers just absolutely love him, and millennials hate Gen Xers. So
Yep.
how much of that is well, we really hate these guys. We don't like their politics. We don't like who they are. We don't like all this stuff about them. So we're gonna screw their character up.
Well,
and we're gonna make them hated.
It's an interesting theory. But Didio was the one who super hated Wally, and he wasn't a millennial.
But he was their hero. He was the millennial type of godfather of sorts.
Do you think it's because like before they ended Barry Allen as the Flash and he kind of went away and Wally West took over? The Flash was like in a bad shape. That was like probably the most boring superhero in the history of the world. And the Flash, Wally West rejuvenated that hero archetype, rejuvenated the character. Do you think they kind of resented the Flash or Wally West for kind of upstaging Barry Allen?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the other part is in I want to say this as simply as possible. I think that in any case, they believe they're doing the character a service, because they're making the character more complex and more tortured inside, and it fits with the mindset of a lot of writers who believe that simplistic characters or characters like Superman, who just they have their power set and they're out for justice, and that's not enough. You have to create a dark shadow inside their personality. You have to do what was done with Mr. Terrific. If you do that, it makes a character more complex, more well-rounded, and better.
Serial killer.
Yeah, and so I think that in Tom King's mind, at least, I think he viewed this as
nuanced.
This is nuanced. This is a new wrinkle to Wally West that makes a character stronger. And unfortunately, I don't think comic books often work that way.
Yeah,
I find it funny that
just the deconstruction does not work most of the time in comics, because what you're tearing down is the fan base's memories and their affection for that character, because there's an emotional connection between comics fans and the characters they love. And when you constantly deconstruct them, you're actually chipping away at their memories and their appreciation for that character.
Yeah,
I find it funny with Wally West that every live action adaptation, pretty much since the '90s Flash show, has basically been Wally West, except without being a name. Because you look at that CW Flash, that's Wally, except he looks like Wally, acts like Wally, but it's called Barry Allen. So it's like this. It's almost like, thank you, Wally, for what you've done, but we're gonna put. It's like someone taking credit. It's like we can't let Wally get the credit. So we got to put him. We got to push him into the dark. Oh, he's evil, or he's brooding, or family got taken away, and all this. Oh, he's punished. by your powers that be, by Dr. Manhattan. Oh no. And it's like they got to do that. And it's unfortunate and doesn't seem like this will be ending anytime soon.
Yeah.
Perch, isn't it nuanced enough that Superman is so powerful he could probably take over the entire Earth, yet he chooses to live among the humans, he loves humans, and he wants to be a part of us?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a lot of things you can do with that. You don't need to add more than that. It's and I'm not sure I completely agree with what I'm saying here, but I do think that in a lot of cases the writers believe they are doing Wally and these other characters a favor, and that's they believe with this storytelling that this is making them better, and it goes to kind of the mindset of how people do comics. But I mean, you look at this attempt to deconstruct characters like Superman and other things. It's like you don't need to do any of this. They've got enough complexity. They've got enough nuance. And if you really want to create this in a new character, make a new character. It's amazing to me in comics how often people seize defeat from the jaws of victory. And with Wally coming back with Rebirth, and it's like, hey, here's a gimme to the fans. There was your victory. Just move on. Just take money and do things other places. You don't need to tinker with this.
And just don't fuck it up.
Sure.
So I do want to say this. We're about halfway through the stream. If you're enjoying this content, you're enjoying the panel, the discussion, give us a thumbs up. We're putting it all out there on the lines. I think we're having a great debate right now. If you are viewing us for the first time and maybe haven't subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing, hit the bell for notifications. I think YouTube might be unsubscribing people again. At least that's what I'm kind of noticing. So I would appreciate all the help. Spread the word, spread the love. We would definitely appreciate that. Now, moving on to the next bit of character assassination. This one is an interesting one. This might be the oldest one. It's Hal Jordan becoming Parallax, Perch.
Yeah.
This was essentially the end of that version of the character. I think after that, it was Kyle Rayner takes over as the Green Lantern. He was somewhat redeemed by the way that he lived. He dies. He goes out essentially saving the world. But this was a big jolt to the system and definitely pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah, it did. This is, so you got to look a little bit, I'll do this quick. I mean, you look at the time, this is 1994, and the planning for this would have been about mid-93. I think that's probably when this stuff was getting set up, maybe a little earlier than that. Ron Mars is going to create this storyline of Green Lantern, Emerald Twilight, and it is Hal Jordan basically kind of snapping when Coast City was destroyed by Mongol. And he is he kind of loses control, realizes that his powers, despite having a lot of powers, he wasn't able to save kind of his city and the people he loved, and this kind of mass murder that went on. And so he decides the only way to be better or to level up is to go and take the other Green Lantern's rings, take all the power for himself. He winds up killing Kilowog and basically just losing his mind and trying to rewrite history. In order to repair the damage. So it's Hal Jordan's heel turn. And you basically get, what's going on at the time, of course, is that Image is starting to go very strong. Marvel is still quite strong as well. And DC is finding themselves kind of worried about becoming third, becoming the shadow in these other two companies of getting all the press and all the attention. So it was time to do something extreme. It was time to make some big changes. And a lot of conversations are going on at the time of how you do that. You've got the death of Superman coming in around this time. You have a lot of things moving and shifting. And so, Hal Jordan was the character that they picked to take this heel turn. There was this idea that this Kyle Rayner character would be something new, something fresh, and also be able to appeal more to this kind of 90s sensibility of an extreme character. And so these were the pieces that moved around to do it. People were pissed at the time. They were not happy with this. I think on a number of different fronts. It felt to a lot of people that it came on suddenly. I think some of the seeds were laid there, but it did happen rather quickly that Hal Jordan kind of flipped. But it indicated in the early 90s, DC had no idea what to do with Hal Jordan. I think they were treading water with him, and they were lost. And so whenever you're lost, you throw in a big heel turn and some murder, and there you go.
A lot of sensibilities in comics had changed at that time, and
right
as far as
at that
creators are concerned. And you had the one truly conservative character that was really conservative. I mean, he was like, pro Nixon back in the day kind of guy, and I think that it was, I think not solely was the reason, but I think part of that was we need to just trash this guy. He's and they didn't know what to do with him because they really hated anything associated with his ideology, and so they turned him into a true villain, and I honestly believe that, but
I don't know. I mean, you may be right. It is Hal Jordan at the time was, of course, with the comics with Green Arrow and everything, was a noted conservative character, one of the few characters DC actually put the politics out there. But it was a messy event. I mean, to put it lightly, it took him off the table for a little over 10 years until they did Rebirth with Green Lantern. And of course there were some other pieces. He became the new Spectre, and that was always a kind of an awkward, weird thing. A little bit, it reminds me of what they've got with Nick Fury being the new Watcher at the moment. It's just that was a weird one. So in general, it was a clunky moment. It was a moment in DC where you had the death of Superman. You had, what did I say, Mongol? The destruction of Coast City. I was completely wrong there. Sorry, that was Cyborg Superman, of course. I don't know why. I don't know what was going on with my head there. He was with Mongol. That's right. I'm now thinking in real time. Here you go. But it was a dark time. It was where DC was like murdering off millions of people, like pretty casually in their comics, and then Parallax coming in and doing all this. Unfortunately, like I said, it didn't land well. Fans were unhappy, and it also just felt really, really clunky in the sense that it wasn't the tone that DC fans were used to. They weren't used to this kind of hot-shotting, more extreme, wiping out a bunch of people kind of stuff. It didn't fit how DC fans viewed their universe, and I think people moved on. Unfortunately, I think Kyle Rayner picked up some fans, and it did. That character grew to be liked by a lot of people, but it was one of those moments with Hal Jordan that never made a lot of sense. They've largely moved past it, though. Unlike some of the other examples we've talked about today, I don't think Hal Jordan is, people don't bring up that moment nearly as much as some of the others, or maybe I'm missing it.
No, I think you're right. That one is kind of forgiven, or forgotten, because eventually they got around to turning him into the Spectre and then bringing him back as Green Lantern again.
Yeah. I think it's been a while, and I think that's a big one. And then so many things in the 90s are like a blender now to people, where you could go down a whole sub list of Wolverine becoming feral, and the Wasp becoming a wasp creature, and there was a lot of goofy decisions made there, and I think it kind of blends together with a lot of that stuff. But
and I think a lot of the 90s stuff gets forgotten or forgiven just because they realized that it was an era of just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah. It's strange. So many fans came out of the 90s, and you hear a lot of people talking very fondly of the 90s. And it's one of those decades where it does seem like people, remember the stuff that they remember, that they liked, and erased huge portions. Because if you really go down the list of a lot of things, there were some really crazy decisions made in the 90s.
Clone Saga.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. There was so much that people skate over when they talk about how amazing the 90s were. But this was one of them.
Yeah, that's definitely that was a big time heel turn. That's one of the bigger early ones. Let's go to something a little bit more current. Now, Larry, I'm going to send this one to you. I find this one repugnant, personally. Captain America's turn in Secret Empire. Hail Hydra, obviously they made a joke about it in the movies and stuff like that. It felt so out of character. It doesn't fit in with the years of history of the character. What did you think about Captain America essentially becoming a Nazi? Is Larry here?
Did we lose Larry?
Oh, sorry. I had an issue on my end. But no, if they'd gone full Nazi, it'd probably been far more shocking. But they're like, well, we're going to soften it up. And how did it actually benefit the character? Was it entertaining? I did not find it to be entertaining. I did not find the twist, the heel turn that they gave Captain America worthwhile. I don't think it put many butts in seats, as it were. Brought people in the shops picking up issues. This isn't like, oh wow, I can't wait to see what happens next. Like, man, they made him Hydra, whatever. Because I think that's more the attitude people had. That seemed to be what I observed. And
we're going to take this, we're going to take 80 years of comic history, or 75 years at the time, 75 years of comic history, and we're just going to turn it completely upside down and say he was an agent the entire time. It's like, what?
That's one of those. I want to blame Spencer. I want to blame him 100%, but no. Editorial said, yeah, let's do this. I wonder if editorial maybe even had the idea and says, hey, we want you to do it. Because it's like, this is the thing. This isn't, I think it's so easily we can blame Nick Spencer. It's his fault. But no, you have to look at, I don't think it's that easy. It's not that cut and dry, because editorial has to green light this stuff. Editorial might even it might have been Brevoort saying, hey, let's make Cap Hydra. Coming in with his little, Jughead hat, and let's make Cap Hydra.
I mean, that's what If is for. That's what comics like What If are for.
Exactly.
You can explore this. You don't do it in the main title. Oh my God, people! What the hell?
So, Persh, I want to talk about the responsibility editorial has on this. I know one of the big things, it's not really on the list, I imagine we were going to talk about at one point, would be Iceman being essentially mind wiped, and now he's a gay character. Now, Cena Grace got a tremendous amount of backlash for that. But from what I understand, actually Marvel's editorial staff kept changing his stories because they were too action-oriented.
Yeah, well, that's what we've been told. I do believe it. I don't think, I think there are many parts of that run were super clunky, and we can't, wash all that off on editorial. But yeah, editorial makes a lot of these decisions. I think that was well said, Larry and Pele as well. This isn't just a guy who sits there and does things, and the editor's like, well, this seems insane and bad for business, but we can't stop him now. Let's just publish it anyway. I mean, these ideas come up, and in many cases they come up in writer summits where it's like, hey, we need to do something to freshen up these characters. Captain America is feeling a little stale. What do we do to kind of jolt that and get some interest? And that's where these things come from. In many cases, it's a group of people who are pitching out ideas. They're growing from there. So there's definitely more than one person involved. The Iceman example, is another one. But and there, it's weird that Cena Grace takes a lot more of the criticism than Bendis, who did it, who put this thing together in a clunky way. I mean, that storyline played out pretty awkward. And then it's like, here you go, Cena Grace. Now do what you can with it. I mean, it's like there's more pieces here. I definitely think that with Captain America, it goes again to the point of, why are you tinkering with something that by and large works? And also, you just went through this world where you had Captain America, and then you aged him, and you had him in Dimension Z, and then you aged him, and then you had the Falcon come in, and you did that, and now we're making him Hydra. Like, slow down and just tell a Captain America story with what you've got. You don't need to pull the rug out every single issue. And absolutely, this is a great point because it does go further back. That Roger Stern put this in canon, that the government was putting false memories in Captain America, and it definitely fits that too. I mean, this is definitely bigger than one guy.
Well, it kind of makes me wonder. Marvel's really, I can't believe this is just kind of something I've thought of before, and I can't believe it's true, but Marvel really seems to have a Nazi problem, because they turned Cyclops into a Nazi. They turned Captain Marvel, Cyclops a Nazi, Captain Marvel into a Nazi. They tried to turn Captain America into a Nazi. They're really obsessed with Nazis. These people
Magneto's
really...
Nazi too.
Yes, Magneto is a Nazi.
They seem to really like them over there, and they keep trying to turn their characters into these white supremacists. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just, why is Marvel so obsessed and enamored with that type of ideology?
It's an easy villain. It's an easy one-dimensional villain, and you roll them in,
and people can relate to it because it's happened.
Yeah, and when you don't have any creativity, it's super, super easy. You don't have to. Of
course, I was being very tongue in cheek.
We picked up on that.
Yeah, and plus the fact that they need to smite their Twitter enemies.
Yeah, I look forward to the day, honestly, where we can have some non-Nazi villains in comics and shows, and there are some, but it is, they've gone to the well way too much with that, including I'm ready for some new villains. Like, can we get some monsters in here, or space, or robots, or anything at this point?
Since we're digging villains out of the ash heap of history, I want the Huns next.
There you go.
That one's a little problematic with our expansion plans in China, but
yeah, well,
I think this is the perfect time to do it. It's the absolute perfect time if you really wanted to talk about justice, real social justice. This is the time to do it. But they don't care about that because it's not the right ideology to lampoon. It's not the right ideology to spear. So
maybe if we could make the Huns the Taiwanese, that might work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe
laughing over there, I guess.
North Koreans.
Oh, you know what? What was that? What was that Japanese death cult from the
moon?
Sarin.
Yeah. We can make that history. We can bring those guys back from the dead to make that the new thing that everybody has to fight.
I just watch some new movies, get some new villains. I mean, seriously, like let's go to some other eras and get some new villains. I'm not saying, by all means use Nazis every now and then, but we need more. Like we need more than just Nazis. Come on.
Well, considering all the riots and everything going on now and all that, it's a perfect time to make the communist villains again.
You think that the commies that are writing them
I know.
are going to make themselves the villains?
I'm just saying it's the perfect time, but we know that won't happen because of the people who are writing it. So
I mean, in fairness, they tried to give us plants, so they're trying to move the bar to plants.
Everyone's using plants all at the same time.
Maybe as long as the plants aren't Nazi plants, I mean, at least we've moved forward a little bit.
Plants by nature would be communists because they're all
Go for Tales to Astonish Monsters. All the stuff, pre-Thor, pre-Spider-Man. Kirby is getting little plots, not little monster attacks kid, and then Kirby goes off and does everything else. Like
I want some plant monsters with some Kirby crackle in it, and then I'll probably accept it.
Cosmic plant monster.
No, they just did that event. What was it? The one with the little kid? No. I'm talking about the one with the little kid with the sketchbook that would draw monsters and they would come to life.
Yeah, it was Monster
Island.
Yeah, it was on Monster Island.
Monsters Attack or something like that. I don't remember what it was. It was another terrible, forgettable event.
Nazi Plants has got
Monsters Unleashed. That was what it was called. Monsters Unleashed.
Oh,
yeah. All right. So Captain America as a Nazi is a bad idea.
We need Mad Jim Jaspers back. That's who we need back because he was not really explored enough. That guy was awesome. He was a great villain.
What about the Fury? They jobbed him out.
They're all coming up in Excalibur.
Yeah, he'll be a hero now. The Fury will be a hero now because that's what they do to all villains. They got to be heroes, and everybody. They can't have Apocalypse. Can't be the bad guy. He's got to be a friend. He helped just try to save the Earth. He cared about the Earth. Stop it. Villains let villains be villains. For the love of God.
Absolutely. So, Percy, do you think it's weird that Marvel's kind of like swept Well, they've tried to sweep this under the rug, but the Captain Marvel or Captain America in the 616 right now is the Cosmic Cube Captain America, and the real Captain America that is Hydra is still in prison, correct?
Maybe. I mean, it's that story got very convoluted at the end, and it was not helped by, at the time, Marvel saying, this isn't imaginary. We're not just going to change this. We're not just going to magically bring back the real Captain America or anything like that. And they sort of did. I mean, it technically, on a technicality, because the Cosmic Cube altered the past, the 616 Captain America is the villain, and the Cosmic Cube kind of recreation or whatever that is that spun out is the nice guy Captain America. But given where this character came from and the fact that Captain America died a few years ago and was pulled through time with a time bullet, I mean, who the F knows, honestly?
I'm confused. I think it's the Cosmic Cube Cap that we still have, though.
I think we just, yeah. But again, I mean, the whole death of Captain America bit where he was shot with a time displacement bullet and came back through. I mean, who knows what we got?
I still have the perfect solution to all of this.
Just don't pay attention. Just write Captain America.
Well, there's that, but I still
Crisis
believe
on Infinite Earths.
No, just a straight up Bobby Ewing walking out of the shower moment with you find out that the last 10, 15 years since about 6 weeks before Civil War I, Franklin Richards has hallucinated it from like
he had a
Kree flying monkey flu or something.
Yeah, he had a flu, he had a fever, and all of that was just some alternate.
It was a fever dream. This whole thing is a fever dream that his powers activated and created real. And as soon as he wakes up and his fever breaks, everything reverts to normal.
But just if you go back pre Heroes Reborn. I mean, go
he
all
goes
the way.
into his he goes like, Mom, and Sue's there and is like, what? I had a bad dream. I had a dream that Captain America was Hydra, and he hears a shower, and then out of the shower comes Namor, and then Franklin's like, no.
but yeah, no, just have him because his powers could still work when he's having a fever dream, and he rewrites
puberty.
He rewrites the universe for a period of time, and then whenever it reverts. But the thing is, people remember it. Everything reverts, but people remember.
Donnie Darko ending.
And then you can allow that you set up conflict for the next few years of some characters that want to make it happen, some ones that want to prevent it, some that just don't give a shit. No, you could do it.
What they should do is have Quicksilver run so fast.
I'd be okay with this too.
Transcends time. He breaks the speed barrier. And then he goes and changes something, and the entire universe is different.
Oh, there you go.
I want like that to happen, and then
you could go back and change. What? That's the wrong one. I was going to say Scarlet Witch. Let's do that one, Doc. He could go back and change Scarlet Witch's. What happened in House of M.
They could have Scarlet Witch just say no more bullshit, and then snap her fingers, and then life's good.
And it kills Marvel's editorial staff. It fires
a dark turn.
Scarlet Witch snaps her fingers and says no more bullshit, and Tom Brevoort's out of a job. The whole thing with I've never felt that. I felt that the pre-House of M, like Avengers Disassembled, was a bigger character assassination of Scarlet Witch than House of M was. Because House of M was just kind of dealing with the fallout of Bendis. Hey, look, once again, Bendis is fucking things up for mutants. Bendis not understanding Scarlet Witch and deciding to make her into some broken thing.
Yeah.
No, they it's
ironic, isn't it, that that Marvel wants to talk about strong women and everything like that, and how and really reinforcing the power of feminism, and they make these incredibly weak decisions. by these ladies and just completely tearing down what they've tried to build up. And
Yeah.
this is a really prime example of it.
I think that House of M was more of the character assassination than, and it wasn't really confined to any one character. I mean, yeah, Scarlet Witch got it with, essentially killing herself in the House of M universe by making herself not exist there.
Yeah. Good point.
But it killed it. House of M literally destroyed Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
It set up a lot of terrible X-Men after that, like an absurd amount of terrible X-Men, like the whole 198 thing. It broke.
Explain the 198 thing so people get better.
Oh yeah, the one after Scarlet Witch at the end of House of M. She says no more mutants, and there's a few of them. In fact, 198 of them that get protected by. I think originally it was like. I don't remember if it was Emma or the Invisible Woman or something like that, but somehow 198 of them end up not getting depowered.
Yeah.
Every other mutant on the planet gets depowered. And to be perfectly honest, I've always been kind of okay with the mutants being a smaller population than they are. I never liked the way that Morrison tried to turn them into an actual minority. They should be a statistical anomaly.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
In
be
my
1%,
opinion,
they shouldn't be 1% of the population the way that Morrison.
Correct. So I never liked there being millions and millions of mutants. A couple of thousand worldwide is more than enough. And so all of them get depowered. So you have something like the Blob. He gets depowered, but he basically just has a bunch of fat, like just skin. He didn't just become skinny. He lost all of his bulk because apparently the bulk was the power, like his mutant power. But the skin that stretched to fit that bulk was not, so he looked like sort of like Larry King's Avatar, like a stack of pancakes. No,
I was about to say you better finish that thing correctly, son. No, man.
No, the stack of pancakes, man. Because it's just flap everywhere.
He said they got the lap band surgery, even though like she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna lose a lot of weight." It's like, "Yeah, honey, but you didn't think about the fact that you're gonna have sheets of skin hanging off of you."
And then you have to go under the knife again and get all that cut off. It kept the main mutants. I think really one of the only ones that got depowered out of the X-Men was Jubilee.
Yeah,
no big loss.
And then they turned a vampire.
Yeah, and then they did, but it did set up a lot of stuff. But
set up a lot of stuff.
Well, one of the things that came after that was the Son of M miniseries with Quicksilver, where he used the Terrigen Mists to repower. Oh yeah, Quicksilver got depowered too. And his power, whenever it came back through the Terrigen Mists, because he figured he could use it to repower all the mutants. It showed that the mists are not deadly to mutants. So the whole point of Death of X and X-Men versus Inhumans was already contrary to its established continuity. But everybody that got repowered with the Terrigen Mist, their powers were similar but different. So he was more of a teleporter now than a speedster.
So, Birch, what do you think about William Medina's comment here? He says, besides Spider-Man, almost all the Marvel stuff happened with Bendis. He has a part to play in it. Do you think that's...
Yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, yes, I think a lot of it is.
It was an accident. I wasn't trying.
Bendis, Bendis was portrayed, and I think the license he had at Marvel was to come in and fix or repair or take characters in a bold new status quo direction. And his style of doing that was often reductive rather than additive. He would come in and he would make changes, often ignoring what he wanted out of their past, and just kind of move things forward. If you look at like what
similar to Superman.
Yeah, exactly. And to the House of M point, you know, a lot of why House of M went on and they did this is because there's a feeling within Marvel that Grant Morrison kind of messed things up by adding these other mutants and making the world too complicated. And they've lost, it's kind of like the Spider-Man problem. We've lost what makes the X-Men unique. And there's too many mutants now and it's too confusing. So the way to fix that is to come in with a hatchet. And that's what Bendis did. Similar to the Spider-Man story of, you know, fans can't relate to a married Spider-Man to a hot model. You know, we need to make him a loser again. I don't know what that says about what they think about the fans, but anyway, that's this idea of, hey, there's a problem here that somebody else did that we let them do, and maybe it was from an era where we weren't in control, and now we want to come in and kind of clean it all up. And Bendis became the guy to do a lot of that, and he wasn't usually subtle in how he did it. He was usually pretty obnoxious about it, and as time wore on, he tended to work less with his editors and the other people. And so I think those stories got even more clunky. With House of M, I mean, I don't know if Doc remembers, it was Bendis' intent that Iceman was going to lose his powers. And if you look at kind of the last issue of House of M, it looks like he's depowered and, but that conversation had not been cleared with people in the X office who still wanted to use Iceman. So then they had to, kind of shoehorn in a story where, no, he hasn't lost his powers. There's kind of a mental block around it. It was one of those examples of just really
survivor's guilt.
Yeah. It was just, but it was terrible in how it all played out. And it was a clear on the page example of people not talking to each other. And
there's so much an easier way to do that. You think you have many mutants, you make humans the villains, and they could create some type of antidote. You put it in the water supply. And before it's too late, they, oh my goodness, they depowered everybody except for 198 people. And humans did it. It's not Scarlet Witch.
But it was an idea that was not well communicated to the editors at the time or the other writers. And so you had this 198, but then, there's kind of this intent that at one point we'll go seek out this 198 and we'll put them on the X-Men reservation there in Stamford, which just saying that out loud sounds insane. But the idea never took. It became kind of a race to how to undo it. At some point, people said, well, 198 is not a real number. It's just kind of an estimate. And there's probably more mutants or maybe less or who knows. And it's I remember this being rolled out at a Comic-Con a few years after. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? Who's planning all this stuff? And Ryan Wilson's comment is perfect. It is. There's way too much deconstruction.
Yeah. They don't construct anything. Yeah. I mean, even Hickman's attempt right now is a simultaneous deconstruction and reconstruction, but it's not actually adding anything. It's just changing it because it's taking away before and replacing it with something else.
Mm-hmm.
I think with Hickman's run, and this is the counter argument people make, is that you got to let it play out. Hickman's a long-term storyteller. He usually has a plan. This is going somewhere. It's going to be additive. I do trust. One aspect I do trust Hickman on is I do think he looks into the past and at least he tries to reconcile things. And I think that can't be said for Bendis and others. But the problem is in the comics industry right now, you got to show a little faster. People don't have the patience to just let this play out for, say, another 4 years and hopefully get to a good place. And if you look at his Fantastic Four and his Avengers run, Hickman was kind of teasing things along the way. This one is feeling like we're maybe at the start of a 10 or a 12-year cycle. And I think people are going to nope out long before we get to the conclusion if they don't start, showing us that, hey, there is a road we're going to. This isn't just,
plant
bar crime.
supremacist drug dealers at a tiki bar.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's you know, it was a lot of titles very, very fast, too fast for the market, and I think it's it's definitely in danger of tipping over, in my opinion. I know it's selling okay, but there's problems. A lot of long-term X-Men fans I talk to are not thrilled with these books,
especially when it ignores. Well, it's ignored everything that everybody wanted out of it. They haven't touched, and everything that they just kind of tolerated has been the focus.
Yeah, it's I don't know. There's so many good parallels to wrestling here, as Larry and others and West have brought up. There's a lot of good parallels. One of them in here, which some people are saying in the chat as well, is you get an idea and it kind of works, and then you just dig the biggest hole in the world with that idea. You just keep
the NWO.
Yeah, the NWO. So, you know, I see it like with all the attention, you get a hit with Venom, and you get some symbiote stuff going, and now you're doing King of Black and you're doing more crossovers and more of it. It feels like the NWO to me, and that it's something that people kind of liked, and now you are just going to milk that to death, and you know, you kill the idea long before its time. It's weird because simultaneously you have on the X-Men universe them seemingly taking a very, very slow boat ride to get to wherever that destination is, and on the other hand, you have them just milking the living hell out of the symbiote stuff. It's a very uneven company.
Yeah, and burning through events faster than you can come up with them, to be perfectly honest.
X-Men's going full Katie Vick.
Oh.
It's fitting too, considering the corpse angle. You know, are the X-Men really the X-Men because they've been dying and coming back? So that's the thing. Like, I hate stories. It's like that. A couple episodes like TNG and Voyager, stuff like that. Oh, you're following the crew. All these bad things are happening. Turns out it's not the real crew. It was like a copies, clones, alternate universe. So it's like it didn't really matter. And that's like how it feels. Like this will not matter. It's like make me feel like it matters. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Oh well.
That's
so
true.
Moving on, we're going to go back to DC Comics now, and this one is interesting. I don't know if everyone's going to know this isn't the most popular character in the history of the world, but Perch, the stuff that DC has done to Roy Harper is just really disgusting. But specifically in that cry for justice time frame where he loses his daughter, but then they like cut his arm off, even though he's an archer, so now he can no longer be a hero and stuff. Pretty grotesque stuff.
Yeah, it felt like a snuff comic. I mean, in many ways, it was very strange what they did here. I mean, Roy Harper, I don't think is the most popular character by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it's definitely a kind of a B character in a sense, but you know, there is that sense, especially now that we're looking at DC and future state and the idea of the next generation. I think Roy Harper was one that they were dutifully building up, and you know, had some fans, had some love. And then they decide to take him through the ringer to kind of really to really drive home the point that bad things can happen to superheroes, I guess. But it's like they just kept bashing over the head the idea that like we're gonna hurt him and we're then we're gonna take some of his limbs, and it's like I don't know why you would do this. Like you always look at these stories and say, okay, the outcome of this is what? Like what?
Well, and they also the way they cut off his limbs, they did it with a specific like sword to where you couldn't even put a robot arm on it.
Yeah.
It's like he ain't an archer no more. There's no unless he's doing it with his feet.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. It was such a strange, and this was meant to be kind of James Robinson's, you know, entry into Justice League, and it was such a weird moment. It was such a weird moment. Now, as somebody in the chat points out, you know, Roy Harper's been a junkie. There's been a lot of pieces in there, but this felt, like I said at the beginning, it felt like a snuff film in a comic. That's how it felt. It was not pleasant to read. It didn't add anything to the character, and it didn't set up. I mean, maybe they were saying like this is going to get, you know, Arsenal and you know make a new character that's more 90s friendly, but but you know, then again, what am I saying? This wasn't the 90s, so I don't know. I like this felt like a 90s decision in this was 2010 ish.
Mm-hmm.
Why Why would they do this?
They were just building up to the point where Ron Mars would put him in a refrigerator.
Yeah.
And then we would all get pissed off, and then maybe Gail Simone got fired. I don't know. I don't know what the fallout is, but hopefully, whatever it involves, hopefully Gail Simone's fired.
Limbing. I don't know. It was such a weird piece because they kill off the kid. It just was his dominoes. We're like, why in the hell are we continuing to do this? It was just a very, very bizarre.
What is an inspirational character? He's a rehab, heroin addict. He was able to become a superhero again
and a single father,
regain the trust of the Justice League.
Single father who raising his daughter, doing the best he can to fight crime, be a good dad, and can't have that. No, grim, gritty, grim, dark.
Yeah, it was so weird. It did feel like we wanted to. We did Identity Crisis, and that pissed off the fans and seemed unnecessarily kind of crappy. So maybe we didn't go far enough. I mean, is that what was being said in the editorial office at the time? Like, we didn't push it home enough with more. We need more dead children. So let's go cry for justice. It was very, very strong or strange, very strange.
Yeah, this is they just really hate those legacy characters at DC.
They hate the like Obsidian and Jade and all these kind of B supporting characters. There seems to be this desire to just screw them up continuously, and then wonder. We get to Future State, and Didio was wondering aloud, why don't we have a better next generation of heroes? It's like, well, you're killing them, and you're torturing them, and you're cutting off parts of their body, and you're like, what? That's why. What are you doing? Like,
you know what? This does bring up one point that I like to make. There's a reason I don't like these. I don't like legacy heroes, and it's one of the reasons why I've never been a huge DC fan. But they do them well. DC wants to be Marvel, while Marvel right now wants to be DC. Marvel's sticking every legacy character you can imagine into their books, and no one likes them. Where DC is killing all the legacy characters they have that everyone likes. It's
weird at DC. A lot of the legacy characters have in some ways matched or even surpassed the original character.
They can just trade their editorial departments. So Marvel, the DC guys can come over and kill all the stupid legacy characters they've created at Marvel in the last few years. And all the Marvel guys that love legacy characters can bring back all the DC legacy characters they've killed. And then everybody's happy.
I think a lot of all this, what we've talked about today, can all be summed up as Marvel has the weakest editorial department in comics as far as spine, as far as the ability to stand up to creators, as far as their ability to keep a coherent narrative within comics. And they are the biggest group of pansies in all of comics, and they get walked all over. They get ignored. Nobody wants to pay attention to any form of continuity within Marvel Comics. And while DC seems to be able to, keep the ship, at least partially right. And it's sad, but I just don't, unless Marvel completely revamps their editorial department and gets people that have balls, that this is just going to keep happening.
Just trade editorials.
Yeah, I mean, you send Eddie Berganza over to Marvel. You won't believe what they'll let him get away with.
It's a bad idea.
Well, no, I just want Jim Lee back too. Get Jim Lee back.
Jim Lee. He ruined XMen. Do you remember that, Doc?
He didn't have a good X-Men run.
No, he didn't.
Jeez. What are you talking about?
We got
Jim Lee back.
Doc loves the artwork.
Chris Claremont was the glue to hold that together, because once you let the inmates start running the asylum, like with Jim Lee and his and the Wildstorm, crew when they were running it. It's like, yeah, we don't need Chris Claremont. Yeah, we're gonna be on this book for 11 issues.
Yeah, well,
It's overhyped.
Bob Harris.
Both companies have an interesting culture right now, and I think Marvel's culture is a certain I don't know if it's an insecurity or it's a we can't give the fans what they want because that would be wrong somehow. So we need to defy expectations and do something different. And it's a cultural belief that taints a lot of what they do. Sorry,
the Marvel one, we can't give our fans what they want because then they'll actually expect that we continue to do that. That's why.
We can't give the fans what they want because they might actually spend their money.
It is. I mean, if you talk to people at Marvel and you listen to them at convention, you listen to what they talk about. There is this kind of we know better kind of cultural kind of just attitude that comes out, and it is very much look. I hear what the fans are saying, but we have a bigger plan. We have a better plan. We know what we're doing. And at DC, there seems to be this insecurity of, hey, the characters we have are not good enough. We need to tinker with them. We need to do more. Hey, we got John Kent, and he's a kid, but it's not good enough. Fans want more, so let's age him up. There's always this desire to kind of fix problems that don't need to be fixed at DC,
or that don't exist,
Yeah, and then
that
at
was
Marvel,
another good character assassination. We could have gotten Superboy Prime and what happened with.
Oh sure,
Ugh,
a lot. But it's if you look at kind of the company, there's a culture in both companies that's different, but it reflects a lot of the decisions that they make, and it sends them down very strange paths consistently. And I think I think Brevoort Casada is probably really that kind of cultural tone that's being set over at Marvel, and at DC it's harder because I think Didio did a lot of that, but he is gone now, so. I don't know who's carrying that culture around, but anyway.
So we're going to move on to the last bit of character assassination. Obviously, there's way more that we could have chosen, but this is kind of taking us right up to the end of the stream today. But I picked Iron Man in Civil War, Larry, but literally you could have taken Reed Richards. You could have taken other characters. What did you think about the treatment of Iron Man in Civil War? He is absolutely 100% a villain in this comic.
Oh, they should have gone full villain, but the character they presented, this poor mother lost her child. I was like, okay, please reveal her to be like Loki in disguise, echoing back to the first Avengers comic where, kind of pitting the heroes against each other, all that. But no, of course not. That would have been. I mean, the thing about it is this is the Marvel Universe. New York has been flooded. New York has been overrun by demons. Galactus has come down. Magneto's torn it to shreds. All these other horrible things have happened. Millions, probably, people have died, injured, and not because of the New Warriors. New Warriors, Nitro blowing up. Oh wow, these school kids. Oh, now we're taking it seriously. Like what after September 11th, huh? You didn't really take it seriously then. You didn't go to Afghanistan to hunt down. You'll cry at the ground zero. I could not help but consider that, considering the end of Civil War, where our 9/11 heroes run up and no, stop it! Look what you've done to the city. I'm like, the city's seen worse. Who cares? And that's how I approached it. And I'm like, that comic pissed me off. Especially Captain America pissed me off to a degree in that comic, but Iron Man more so. This is a guy who's like, no, you're not going to use my armor. I'm not giving up my stuff to anybody, governments, other organizations, other companies. You will not buy me. Not necessarily like Ayn Randian, but more of like the Howard Hughes deal. This is not a guy who is. I'm going to be the government stooge. I'm going to get villains together. I'm like, him? No, not even at his worst. When he was drinking, he would not be like that. It's totally it. Now I can see him going to like getting. I don't know if you guys ever read the U.S. War Machine comic that Chuck Austin did. This weekly comic. I love it. And the fact that it's like, okay, you killed a gang, guy kills this hostage, and Rhodey's like, screw this, kills him, but it's on TV. And it's like, S.H.I.E.L.D. comes in, like, we're going to get some armors. We've taken some of the Stark armors. We're going to go in and start kicking ass. I'm like, yeah, that right there, that would have been an army of Iron Men showing up.
I love that Dum Dum had his bowler hat on his on his War Machine costume.
MODOK without a face. That was one of the and what was it? Darkhawk, who's
Yeah.
like in a VR simulation because he's psychotic. I was like, this is great. But that kind of taking that cue, borrowing from Chuck Austin, as crazy as that would have been better than what Miller and the editorial did to Iron Man in Civil War, which is make him a villain, but not go full, like full evil. Like they're like, well, he has a point. Yeah, it's the image of the Native Americans, like trust the government, turn in your arms, trust the government. It works out great.
As I said earlier, if they would have kept it an ideological fight that turned physical, it would have been fine. But once you started having Tony hiring terrorists to, basically prove his point, and rounding up his friends to put into a prison and making Robo Thor that kills Goliath. Sorry, any moral high ground you had in your argument just goes out the window.
Yeah, how much of all this, comes down to, you've got creators that are so out of touch with reality and what readers' expectations are, that they actually see villainous actions as heroic, or they see heroic actions as villainous. And I think a lot of that, I think that's honestly the case with a lot of what we're seeing in comics from the last 20 years, is that people that actually think that heroic actions are villainous and villainous actions can be heroic, and it just throws everything out of whack.
I'm surprised we haven't seen the idea of, here, I saved you from this burning. Did I ask to be saved? It's like, I didn't consent to being saved by the likes of you. You're an Asgardian. I don't like your kind. You're Aryan, blonde hair, blue eyes. You think you control everything. Thou hast lost thy mind. It flies off.
Well, I mean, it's like we discussed. What was it, last week or the week before? They've gotten to the point where they're just stuffing perfectly reasonable arguments into the mouths of like actual Nazis, like the Red Skull, just to
to make
what your
those
country
points.
fought for, Walmart, this, that, whatever. Like, you know what? He's not wrong. Don't make me agree with Red Skull. What is wrong with you people?
Yeah. I'm not going to think that his argument is bad just because he's bad.
Yep, exactly. And it's reached a point now. It's reached a tipping point where their ideology, their ideas are so counter to what we consider, right, that their villains are they're villainizing the thoughts and ideas of normal people, and that's dangerous. It's sick, in my opinion.
It's a weird thing where everything's a shade of gray. There's no black and white when it comes to heroes and villains. But so Pritchett, and one of the reasons I love Civil War, I think it's a really good story, but I've never really liked Tony Stark, Iron Man, as a hero. Sure. I bet if you were like an Iron Man fan, that would have like a kick in the nuts.
Yeah, I think so. And that's how it played out for people. I mean, it was weird. Marvel wanted you to believe both sides had a point. They kind of teed it up that way, but then, a lot went in different directions. I look at in fact, I'm looking at it right now. I've got the Civil War hardcover right here. It's got Mark Miller's original pitch to it. And he was, it was not as balanced in his original pitch as where it came across. And you see him in these notes arguing with Joe Casada and Tom Brevoort about this. And Tom Brevoort in particular is saying, Iron Man's really got a point here. There's been things that are out of control. This is how we need to portray this. And it was just a misunderstanding, I think, of how the readers are going to take this issue and how they're going to take Tony Stark's personality. I think Larry made a great point earlier about this being really out of character for in many different ways. It was just a misunderstanding. And I do think that there is this, keep in mind, a lot of these writers, they came up and they watched, powerful deconstruction movies where their favorite superhero movie was ones where it really showed the hero being tortured or revealing kind of dark secrets. And they want to have that same weight and resonance in their own work. The problem is those things usually work in a movie because you're getting one every 3 years or 4 years. You're not getting them every month. And it's not this constant drumbeat of dark deconstruction to your heroes. So when you're trying to insert them into your comics constantly, you're eroding the platform that makes that deconstruction work. You have to have a really strong character, a really strong platform to occasionally chip away at it and maybe show a new, facet of the personality. But if like with Tom King we talked about earlier, if you come in and your MO is always to deconstruct, then you're just wrecking characters at that point.
Yep. So I don't think Iron Man really has ever recovered at least in Marvel Comics since then, personally. But I know that's basically going to wrap us up today. I think we had a good discussion. We got in a bunch of character assassinations from DC Comics and Marvel. Let's do some comic book recommendations. Larry, I know you said you were busy creating this week. Is there any comic book that you think you should recommend to people this week?
Well, it's an old one, but it's a good one. It is The Tick, Complete Edlund. Ben Edlund's The Tick. Fantastic comic, black and white. Just goes to show you, I'm doing a little comic as part of a little newsletter for New England Comics, and eventually ends up becoming a writer and TV and getting that comic into an amazing cartoon and a great live action show, one of two anyways, and writing some really good episodes of Angel back in the day, and I think also Firefly back when Whedon was cool. So yeah, the Tick, the Complete Edlund.
Nice,
very well done, Doc. I know we just reviewed some X-Men comics. Are you recommending anything this week?
Buy back issues. No, you know what? New Mutants wasn't bad. It was pretty good. I'd say it's worth the money. If you want to, but that's actually, Hellions was all right. Otherwise, buy back issues. Lots and lots of back issues.
Oh, all right, Pele. What do you recommend at the shop this week? Is Pele there? I think Pele's out. Perch, what are you recommending this week?
It wasn't the strongest week, for sure. I like Cable the best of the three of them personally, but but I know, Doc, you like your Doug Krakoa Warlock thruple, so I know you're all in on that.
Sad boy Doug.
I think that the Batman's grave is winding up. I think that's a pretty decent issue. I think it's been an interesting take on Batman. Not all perfect, but it's nice to see just a straightforward Batman tale. Redneck was okay. Its stealth is still all right. It wasn't the strongest. Yeah. I had a hilarious time reading the Avengers, but that's for a very, very different reason.
Because Jason Aaron sucks.
That comic has gone off the rails in such spectacular ways. It's absolutely amazing. I also, Ryan Wilson in the chat mentioned you. I recently just reread The Boys as well. I enjoy that comic. It's good fun. It's dumb in certain areas, and it's better for it. It's just a good thing. And yes, I was the one who made the video about Stephen Platt.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I accidentally muted my mic here. Usagi Yojimbo, it's fantastic. I've really been enjoying the resurgence in that title. A lot of new interest in it going forward. That's fantastic. The pick of the week at the shop, of course, was Spider-Man 850, Spider-Man number 50. Mainly because we ordered so many damn copies. But Flash 763. But I would say Usagi Yojimbo though. I really thought number 13 was fantastic.
Well, most of the ones I would have been recommending have already been mentioned. New Mutants, Hellions, Stealth. Rorschach number 1 from Tom King. I do not like him as a writer, but I thought it was a pretty good mystery comic. The art was fun. If you like crime noir. I think you probably like Rorschach #1. Although because it's Tom King, we know he's going to destroy the character somehow in the end. But my highest recommendation this week is from a comic publisher called Storm King Comics. And it's John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction Vortex 2.0, #4. Now, John Carpenter doesn't write that comic. His name is just in the title. But it's absolutely excellent. If you like Alien, like the Alien franchise, imagine Sigourney Weaver and what was the girl's name? Little girl?
Newt.
Sigourney Weaver and Newt, when they're recovered 60 years later and they're thawed out, they realize that humans had discovered the aliens in the meantime and were using them as part of an upgraded technology and wake up in that world. That's kind of what that comic book is. And it's excellent from Storm King Comics. John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction Vortex 2.0. 1.0 is a comic a story that precedes it. It's really good. I definitely highly recommend that one. That one's excellent. But you are right. It is a kind of a bland week this week.
Yep, kind of vanilla, but there are a few good gems out there, but I think most of them are in the independent slots. So,
yep. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a really fun conversation talking about the worst character assassinations in comic book history. I will see y'all later. I'm out.